Hey, it's Becky from Patchwork Posse. Today I thought I would show you how to make the pumpkin that you are going to need to make this table runner. So let's take a look at it. We've got some flying geese, a couple pinwheels, and 3 different sizes of pumpkins. So these pumpkins are all sewn the same way. So check the description for the link to get the printable PDF. But yeah, let's make something cute. The first thing you're going to need are all of your parts cut. So I've got the pumpkin itself, and then I need the 4 squares that are going to be on the background on the corners. Then we have 2 rectangles for the top area where the stem is. And then I've got 1 little background square for the top of the stem. So the first thing we're going to do is draw some lines. So we're going to need some lines on the back side or the wrong side of our squares. So just set them down, use your pencil and your ruler. You could also use a hair marker or like a disappearing ink pen, but just something that you can follow, because this is going to be your sewing line actually. So what you are drawing is your sewing. With that done, we are ready to sew. So the first thing we're going to do is place our background piece on our stem of the pumpkin. I've got mine going from the top left to the bottom right, but you can turn it either direction. It doesn't really matter. And you're going to take this over to the machine and stitch right on that drawn line. With that sewn, you're going to cut past your sewn line 1/4 inch. And you're going to take this to your ironing board, and you will need to press this so it's open, just like this. Now double check the size, and if you need to square this up after you've sewn it, then now is the time to do that. All right, now we are going to make the body of our pumpkin. We are going to lay our blocks in each of these 4 corners, and we're just going to pin them in place. So I have the drawn line you want to make sure is going the correct direction. So I've got it from the top right to the bottom left. Over here, I have it from the top left to the bottom right. And for this one, I want from the top left to the bottom right again. And this last corner from the top right to the bottom left. Now you're going to line up the 2 sides with the pumpkin piece as well as your squares. So make sure everything is set. Now you can take this over to your sewing machine and stitch them down. I want to sew just on the outside of that drawn line, so then when it gets pulled back, the thickness of the fabric and the thread don't make this block small. So just, make sure that you're just doing just a little bit of a scant on the outside of that drawn line. This block really does sew up super quick. We're going to do the same thing as we did for this piece. We are going to take our ruler, line it up so we're cutting 1/4 inch past our sewn line. Now if you need to check before you cut, this would be the time to do it. So you can push your fabric back out and making sure that you've sewn the correct direction. And we are going to take this to our ironing board and give this a good press. Now, like I mentioned before, double check your size and make sure that you're still the correct size for this pumpkin. And if you need to make any adjustments, go ahead and do that. So we are going to lay these pieces out, and we are going to stitch our stem in between the two background pieces that we have. With that pressed, the last thing we need to do for our pumpkin is to pin these two pieces together, lining up our sides, and taking this over to the sewing machine and stitching it down. All right, with that finished, we can go ahead and give a final press for this block. Now you just need to double check and square up the block if you need. But now you are able to finish the rest of the pumpkins that you need for the table runner. I wanted to show off what the table runner looks like when it is finished and talk just a little bit about the quilting as well. So for this quilting, I did straight lines. They're about 1 inch apart. I used my Hera marker for this. So this is by Clover. The link will be in the description for this, but that was to mark my lines so that I could follow them. Now I started kind of just going across, and I thought I don't want to do this for the whole thing. I also don't want to do a grid. So what I decided to do was change directions. So if you can see the quilting and the shadow here, I've got, it just moves. So I believe, where did I start? I started over here and I quilted from this out. So from here out is all going diagonally. And then on this line, I drew or marked one line coming down, and then I quilted this direction, the same distance, 1 inch. And then because I had a solid line right here stitched, then when I changed directions, I could put my quilting, or, you know, all of my lines stopped at that last sewn or quilt line. So that's just a fun way to add some interest without doing them all the same direction. Feel free to, you know, mark it up and then just change direction. So I've got an area going from the top left to bottom right, and then this whole corner goes from top right to bottom left. I simply used my ruler to mark everything out. The other blocks you're going to need are like a super simple pinwheel, very quick to make. You're going to need 2 of those, and you will need some flying geese units. So for these flying geese units, I did do paper piecing because they run just a little bit smaller, and it was a lot easier to do it that way. For the back side, I used just a collection of fabric that I had left over from the front, and I just did the binding where you take it from the back side to the front, and because there's 3 different fabrics, it does change on the front as well, which is a lot of fun. So it adds a little bit of interest. This is a table runner. I'm not too worried about doing a perfect binding on here. I just would like the project to be done. This is kind of a wide shot of what the table runner is. Again, you can find a link in the description for the different sizes that you're going to need. The size that I just sewed in the video was for this placement. And depending on where you put your square on the stem, you could put it on the other side or sew it the other direction, and these can change directions. On this one, I didn't even do one, so if you forget, that is just fine as well. I hope you have fun and sew yourself a little pumpkin table runner.